My name is Marissa Caldwell. I'm 38 years old. And I didn't understand my marriage had already turned into a power game until my husband looked me dead in the eye and said, like he was reading out a rule he'd been waiting to enforce, "You're on the couch until you apologize for something you didn't do." It's strange. The things your body remembers more clearly than your mind. I remember the way the living room lamp cast a warm oval on the carpet. I remember the faint lemon cleaner smell from the kitchen because I'd mopped that morning, like a woman trying to keep order in a house that was quietly slipping out of her control. And I remember how calm my voice sounded when I answered him, because shock has always done that to me. "Fine by me," I said. Colin blinked, like he expected tears, or bargaining, or the old version of me, polite, eager, smoothing everything over so we could get back to normal. But I didn't do any of those things. Because here's the thing, I hadn't done anything wrong. And I could feel it in my bones that if I apologized for a lie today, I'd be apologizing for bigger lies for the rest of my life. 3 weeks earlier, it had started with something so absurd I still have trouble saying it out loud without feeling embarrassed, like the universe might hear me and laugh. Our new neighbors had just moved in. I'd noticed them in the driveway a couple of times. A young woman, Sophie Park, maybe 23, small, bright-eyed, always in motion. And her boyfriend, Matt Rivera, the kind of guy who smiled like he apologized for taking up space. I didn't know them. I wasn't trying to know them. I was just taking out the garbage. That was literally it. One black trash bag, one early evening, one ordinary moment that Colin somehow managed to turn into a trial. Sophie was in front of their door, wrestling with a box big enough to fit a toddler-sized couch. It looked like it weighed about as much as she did. The box tilted, she swore under her breath, and I saw her arms shake. I paused, because I'm not the kind of person who watches someone struggle and keeps walking just to prove a point. "Hey," I said, lifting the trash bag higher on my hip. "Need a hand?" Sophie looked up, surprised, then relieved. "Oh my God, yes, thank you. I thought I could do it, but it's worse than it looks." I set the trash down, grabbed the bottom edge of the box, and together we shuffled it up the small step to her door. 2 minutes, maybe less. "So you just moved in?" I asked, mostly because silence feels awkward when you're pressed shoulder to shoulder with a stranger and a cardboard box. "Yesterday," she said, breathless, pushing hair out of her face. "We're still living out of bins. Matt thinks he's a master organizer. He's not." I smiled because that was normal, human, the kind of tiny joke neighbors exchange every day. "Well, welcome," I said. "If you need anything, like, I don't know, a spare screwdriver." She laughed. "I'm probably going to need a whole toolbox." "Same," I said. And we both chuckled like this was a harmless little moment in a harmless little neighborhood. And then I went back to my trash. That should have been the end of it. But when I walked inside, Colin was standing at the top of the stairs with his arms crossed, watching me like I'd come home with lipstick on my collar. "What was that?" he asked. I remember pausing halfway into the kitchen because the tone didn't match reality. "What was what?" "You, outside, with her." "The new neighbor?" I said, still confused. "Sophie? She had a heavy box." Colin's jaw tightened. His eyes, those careful, image-aware advertising eyes, narrowed like he was zooming in on details he wanted to use later. "You were all over her," he said. I actually laughed once, a short sound, because it felt like a joke that didn't land. I carried a box to her door. "You were smiling," he snapped. I stared at him. "I smile at baristas too, Colin. Should I stop doing that?" His nostrils flared, and I saw it then, something I'd seen before but always labeled as stress or insecurity or a rough week. The way he needed a villain so he could be righteous. The way he needed me to be guilty so he could be powerful. "Don't manipulate me," he said, voice low like he was doing me a favor by not yelling. "I know what I saw." "What you saw," I repeated slowly, "was your wife being polite." But Colin shook his head like I'd failed some secret test. "No," he said, "what I saw was you enjoying the attention." My stomach went cold. Not because he'd caught me, he hadn't, but because of what that sentence meant. It meant he didn't trust me. Or worse, he didn't even want to. He wanted an excuse. He wanted a reason to put me beneath him and call it consequences. And then he said the line, the one that split my life in two before and after. "You're on the couch until you admit it and apologize." I remember looking at him and realizing something terrifyingly simple. Colin wasn't asking for peace. He was asking for submission. I stood there for a full second, still in my work blouse, still smelling faintly like the printer paper and conference rooms of my day job, still thinking like a project manager who solves problems with logic and checklists. And I said, "All right." His face changed, just a flicker, surprise, because he expected me to fight. "That's it?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, my voice steady. "All right, I'll sleep on the couch until you apologize." His eyes widened. "Excuse me?" "I didn't do anything wrong," I said. "I'm not apologizing for helping a neighbor. If you want this to be a standoff, okay? But I'm not confessing to something I didn't do." Colin stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Then he turned, walked into our bedroom, and shut the door hard enough that the frame rattled. That night, I slept on the couch. And I won't romanticize it, it was miserable. Our couch is great for movie nights. Deep cushions, soft throw pillows, the kind of thing you sink into with popcorn and a blanket. It is not built for 8 hours of sleep when your spine has already spent the day hunched over a laptop and your mind keeps replaying your husband's accusations like a scratched record. By 3 a.m., my neck was stiff. By 5 a.m., my lower back felt like it had been bent the wrong way. And the worst part wasn't the pain. The worst part was the humiliation. I could hear Colin in our bedroom moving around, comfortable, sheltered behind a closed door, while I lay in the living room, like a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. In the morning, he came downstairs like nothing had happened, like he was a king checking whether the servant had learned her lesson. He found me making coffee. My hair was a mess, my eyes gritty, but my hands were steady on the mug. He leaned against the counter and asked casually, "So, ready to apologize?" I didn't even look up. "Nope." His mouth tightened. He grabbed his keys and left for work without another word. By the third night, I realized something. This wasn't a punishment meant to end. It was a punishment meant to train me. And I don't train well. We had a spare room, decent size, technically meant for guests. In reality, it was a storage graveyard. Old boxes, a folded pull-out bed, winter coats, and Colin's overflow wardrobe, because he treated closets the way some people treat appetizing menus, as if more options meant more control. That night, I took a pillow, a blanket, and my phone charger. I walked past the couch without looking at it like it was an enemy, and I went into the spare room. The pull-out bed groaned when I unfolded it. It smelled faintly like dust and forgotten holidays. But when I lay down, my body sank into a flat, uncomfortable peace that still felt better than the living room exile. The next morning, Colin noticed. He paused at the doorway, eyes scanning the room like he couldn't believe I'd moved my misery out of his sight. "Couch too rough for you?" he asked, smirking. "Yep," I said. "Then apologize." "No." He chuckled like I was a child making a dramatic point. "Fine, enjoy the pullout." He thought he was winning. And in a way, he was, because he'd finally pushed me into the corner he wanted. But what Colin didn't understand was this. If you force a woman into a corner long enough, she doesn't always crumble. Sometimes she starts building. I have a solid income. I'm a project manager. Deadlines, budgets, planning, contingencies. Colin earns well too in advertising, but we've always kept separate personal accounts after bills. That was one of those modern marriage things we'd bragged about early on. Independence, fairness, maturity. I had about $3,000 saved for a hobby I'd been excited about for months. And on day 4 of my exile, I opened my banking app, stared at that number, and made a decision that felt both petty and startlingly sane. "If you want to die on this hill," I whispered to myself, "I'll build a whole life on mine." That afternoon, I ordered a queen-size memory foam mattress. $800, fast delivery. When the confirmation email popped up, my chest did something strange. It loosened. Because for the first time in days, I didn't feel like I was waiting for Colin to decide what I deserved. I was deciding. And somewhere upstairs, behind our bedroom door, Colin was still convinced he had me exactly where he wanted me, on the verge of caving. He had no idea that the spare room wasn't going to be my punishment. It was going to be my proof. The mattress arrived 2 days later. It came rolled tight in plastic like a secret I'd ordered to my own doorstep. I remember dragging it down the hallway, the cardboard scraping the floor, my arms straining, sweat prickling behind my knees. Because of course Colin didn't offer to help. That would have required acknowledging that I was still his wife, still someone worth basic decency. Instead, he stood at the top of the stairs watching, arms folded, face unreadable. "You're really doing this," he said, like I was the one being dramatic. I didn't look up. I kept dragging. "I'm really sleeping," I answered. He scoffed and disappeared back into our bedroom like a man closing a tab he didn't want to deal with. I got the mattress into the spare room alone. I sliced the plastic with scissors, and it hissed as air rushed back in, expanding into shape. It felt symbolic in a way that made my throat tighten. Because I'd been shrinking for so long, quietly, politely, in little invisible ways, while Colin expanded. His opinions, his rules, his moods, his standards, his need to be right. And now something in my life was expanding again. For me. That night, I slept on that mattress with a kind of stubborn peace. My back didn't ache, my jaw unclenched. And when I woke up, I wasn't disoriented and ashamed on the couch like a guest in my own home. I was in a room with a door I could close. A room that, if I was honest, Colin had never really cared about until it became mine. By day 7, my mind had shifted into project mode. If Colin wanted to punish me by exiling me from our bedroom, fine. But I wasn't going to live like a refugee in a storage unit. So I started making a list. Not an emotional list, not a revenge list. A practical one. What do I need to function like a human being in here? A desk, a real chair. Better lighting. Something to make it feel like a space, not a punishment. And yes, if I wanted to be petty, I could admit it. Something to make it feel like Colin had lost access to the version of me who used to fold herself in half just to keep him comfortable. So I scoured online marketplaces during lunch breaks and late nights. A leather armchair for $200 from a woman moving out of state. A sturdy oak desk for $150 from a guy who wrote, "Must pick up today," like it was a hostage situation. A 55-inch TV for $300 from someone who swore it was barely used and then proceeded to sell it from a living room filled with toddler toys. I borrowed my best friend Jenna Morales' van because Jenna is the kind of friend who doesn't ask questions first. She just shows up with snacks, a tight ponytail, and the energy of someone ready to help you do something you might regret later. "What are we doing?" she asked when I opened the door. "Building a bunker," I said. Jenna raised an eyebrow. "Against what? Zombies?" "Worse," I answered. "Colin's ego." Her mouth twitched like she wanted to laugh, but didn't because she could see the exhaustion in my face. "Okay," she said and popped the van trunk. "Let's build your bunker." We moved everything in while Colin was out. Because of course I timed it that way. That's how you survive a war. You move quietly while the enemy thinks you're still starving. When we carried the desk down the hall, Jenna whispered, "He's going to lose his mind." "I know," I whispered back. And the thought didn't scare me as much as it should have. That was the first sign that something in me had changed. By day 10, I leaned in. A microwave, $60. Floating shelves, $50. A cozy rug, $120. And blackout curtains, $40. Because the spare room faced the street, and I didn't need strangers watching me rebuild my sanity like it was entertainment. The room transformed fast. It stopped looking like storage. It started looking like a choice. It started looking like a life. Colin still didn't step inside. He'd knock sometimes, not to apologize, not to talk, just to comment. "You're being childish," he'd say through the door like he was narrating my downfall. I'd answer from the other side, calm as a therapist. "I'm being comfortable." He hated that word. Comfortable. Because it meant his punishment wasn't working. And Colin was a man who needed his punishments to work. The keypad lock was day 18. It was my favorite part. Not because I wanted to lock my husband out like some villain, but because I wanted something Colin couldn't do to me anymore. Walk in whenever he wanted and change the atmosphere of the room with his mood. I wanted control over my own nervous system. The lock was $150 and installed in 20 minutes. When I punched in the code for the first time and heard the soft click of the latch, I felt my shoulders drop an inch. Safety isn't always about danger. Sometimes it's about peace. By week 3, I'd spent around $2,800. And my little room, my little exile, was now everything our bedroom wasn't. My space, my rules, my style. Colin started calling it the guest room again, like repeating the old name would erase what I'd built. "You can't just claim a room," he texted one afternoon. I stared at the message and felt my mouth curl into something that wasn't joy exactly, more like clarity. "You claimed the whole bedroom, didn't you?" I typed back. "You claimed the master. I'm just making do." He responded instantly. "That's different." It wasn't. He just wanted it to be. The night everything came to a head, I was sitting in my armchair with my laptop on my knees, video chatting with Jenna. She was eating cereal out of the box like an adult who'd given up on pretending. "You look calmer," she said. "I am calmer," I admitted. "And that makes him furious." "Yeah," I said softly. "It does." I didn't hear Colin approach. I only heard the first attempt at the handle. A rattling sound. Then silence. Then a sharper tug. I muted Jenna. Another tug. Then Colin's voice, low and tight through the door. "Marissa, why is this door locked?" I stared at the door for a second. Part of me wanted to answer gently. Part of me wanted to explain again that I wasn't doing this to hurt him. But another part of me, newer, steadier, knew this wasn't about understanding. It was about control. So I kept my voice flat. Privacy. Open it, now. No thanks, I said. Silence. Then the pounding started. Hard, angry hits that made the shelves vibrate. Marissa, open this door. I stood, walked closer, but didn't touch the lock. I spoke through the door like I was speaking through a boundary line. Colin, you kicked me out of our bedroom. This is my space now. I didn't kick you out, he snapped. I told you what you had to do. That sentence, what you had to do, made something cold settle in my stomach. Like he'd confessed without realizing it. I didn't do anything wrong, I said. Apologize for falsely accusing me whenever you're ready. I'm not apologizing, he spat. Then I'm good in here. I turned and walked back to my chair. I thought that would be the end. But Colin wasn't the type to lose quietly. He needed an audience. So a minute later, I heard him in the hallway, phone on speaker, loud enough for me to hear every word. Dad, Colin said, voice dripping with performative frustration. She's lost it. She locked herself in the spare room and won't come out. His father's voice came through the speaker, older, gravelly, tired in a way that suggested he'd raised his son through 1,000 tantrums. Locked herself in the spare room, Frank Hayes repeated. What for? Colin hesitated. I could practically hear him scrambling for a version that sounded less ridiculous. She's being punished, Colin said finally. For what? Frank asked. Colin's voice tightened. She was flirting with the neighbor. Frank paused. Was she? Colin snapped. Dad, whose side are you on? I'm on the side of reality, Frank said dryly. What did she do? Colin went quiet, like he couldn't believe he had to say it out loud. She helped her carry a box, he muttered. There was another pause, long enough that I pictured Frank's eyebrows lifting in disbelief. That's it? Frank asked. You didn't see how she looked at her? Colin insisted. Colin, Frank said, voice firm now. If this is really what happened, maybe you should apologize. I froze. Not because Frank siding with me fixed anything. It didn't. But because it revealed something important. Colin didn't just want control over me. He wanted control over the narrative. And even his own father wasn't buying it. Colin hissed something under his breath, then snapped, Forget it, and the call ended. A second later, he was back at my door, pounding like he could knock my boundaries down with noise. You embarrassed me, he shouted. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just stood on my side of the door, hand resting lightly on the keypad like a reminder to myself that this calm, this space, this refusal was mine. You embarrassed yourself, I said quietly. You turned a box into a courtroom. The pounding stopped. For a moment, there was only silence. And then, softly, dangerously, Colin said, I'm calling a locksmith. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. You can try, I called back, but you already know an interior lock isn't illegal, and you already know you can't force me out of a room in a house I own too. Silence again, because he had looked it up. Colin didn't bluff unless he knew he could win. And this time he couldn't. A flood of texts hit my phone. This is insane. You're acting like a teenager. That room is for guests. Your stuff is still in our bedroom. Come back. I read them from my armchair, my room lit warmly, my TV screen reflecting softly off the leather. Then I typed one sentence and sent it. I'll come back when you're ready to apologize for accusing me of something I didn't do. A minute later, Colin replied, I'm not apologizing. So I set my phone down. I opened my laptop, and I went back to living my life. The next morning, while I was at work, Colin finally stepped into my room. I know because I had a camera in there, legally placed, facing my belongings, not him, just like I'd researched to make sure I stayed on the right side of the law. I watched the footage later with my stomach in knots. Colin opened the door slowly, like he expected to find a disaster. Instead, he found my little apartment. He stood in the doorway for a full 5 minutes. 5 minutes of a man realizing his punishment had become my sanctuary. He touched the TV. He sat in the armchair. He ran his hand over the desk like it offended him that it existed. And when he saw the blackout curtains, the rug, the shelves, his face shifted into something I hadn't seen in a long time. Not anger, not superiority, something closer to fear. Because he finally understood, I wasn't waiting. I wasn't begging. I was building. That night, when I got home, Colin was sitting at the kitchen table. No rage this time. Just a kind of flat defeat. You built a whole apartment in there, he said. It's a room, I answered, setting my bag down, with a fridge and a microwave and a lock. Don't be dramatic. His eyes flicked up. How much did it cost? My personal savings, I said, not joint funds. Colin swallowed. He stared at the table for a long time, like he was calculating not money, but power. Then he looked at me and asked, quieter than before, You're really not going to apologize? My heart thudded once, heavy, steady. No, I said, not for something I didn't do. He nodded, as if confirming something he didn't want to admit. Then he pushed his chair back and stood. This is absurd, he said, voice tight. I watched him walk toward the stairs, toward the bedroom he'd claimed like a throne. It was absurd 3 weeks ago when you started it, I said softly. Colin froze for a second, hand on the banister. Then he continued up, and when his footsteps disappeared, the house felt oddly still. Not peaceful. Not yet. But clear, because I could feel it coming. The next escalation, the next move, the next moment where Colin would try to regain control in a bigger, messier way. And as I walked down the hall to my room, fingers brushing the keypad, I realized something that made my throat go tight. He wasn't going to stop until he won. So I wasn't just building a room anymore. I was building proof. And Colin was about to learn what happens when you exile a woman who knows how to plan. Control doesn't disappear when it fails. It mutates. Colin didn't speak to me much after the night he saw my room. Not really. He still talked, comments, remarks, strategically placed sighs, but he stopped engaging. And that silence wasn't peace. It was recalibration. The first move came quietly. My laundry didn't get done. At first, I didn't notice. We'd never officially divided chores. We just drifted into patterns. I cooked more. He handled laundry. It had been that way for years. One of those arrangements you don't question until it's weaponized. I opened the dryer one evening and found it empty. Then the washer. Empty. My clean clothes were gone from the basket, too. I checked the bedroom closet out of habit, and there they were. Folded, neat, untouched. But only his things had been washed. Message received. I stood there for a moment, hands on my hips, and felt something familiar try to rise. Irritation, yes, but also that old reflex to fix it. To knock on the bedroom door and say, "Hey, did I do something wrong?" Instead, I closed the closet. I went online. That night, I found a compact washer-dryer combo, listed locally for $400. Barely used. Fits in small spaces. Perfect reviews. It arrived 2 days later. I installed it myself with a YouTube tutorial and a wrench borrowed from Jenna. When it hummed to life for the first time, vibrating slightly against the wall, I laughed out loud. Not because it was funny, because it was freeing. Colin noticed that evening. He stared at the machine like it was a personal insult. "You bought a washer," he said. "I bought independence," I answered, loading my clothes calmly. He scoffed. "You're being ridiculous." I pressed the start button. He walked away. Next, he stopped cooking my share of dinner. Again, quiet, calculated. I'd come home and find the kitchen smelling incredible. Roasted chicken, garlic, something simmering, and just one plate on the table. When I didn't react, he escalated. He cooked elaborate meals and ate them slowly in front of me, scrolling his phone, humming occasionally like a man enjoying a private performance. So I adjusted. I started meal prepping on Sundays. Containers lined up in my mini fridge like proof of competence. I even added an air fryer, $80, small enough to sit on my desk. The spare room smelled like rosemary and lemon chicken instead of defeat. Colin started eating faster. The house meeting came a week later. He didn't warn me. He just texted, "We need to talk tonight, 7 p.m. When I came home, Tracy Nolan was already there. Colin's friend from work. Polished, sympathetic eyes. The kind of woman people bring in when they want to look reasonable. They were sitting on the couch. My couch. Like I was about to be intervened upon. "Marissa," Tracy said gently when she saw me, "thanks for sitting down." I didn't sit. I leaned against the wall instead, arms folded loosely, not defensive, just finished with games. "What's this?" I asked. Colin spoke first, voice careful, curated. "Tracy's here to help us talk through this. You've taken things too far." I glanced at Tracy. "Do you know why I'm in the spare room?" She hesitated. Colin said there was a disagreement. "That's one word for it," I said calmly. "He accused me of flirting with our neighbor because I helped her carry a box." Tracy blinked. "That's it?" Colin cut in. "It wasn't just that." I tilted my head. "What else was it?" Silence. Tracy shifted uncomfortably. Colin exhaled sharply. "You turned the spare room into a bachelor pad." "It's not a bachelor pad," I said. "It's a bedroom, with a lock, because you exiled me." Tracy tried again. "But it was supposed to be for guests." I smiled, not kindly, not cruelly. "What guests?" I asked. "Your dad stays in hotels. Your cousin hasn't visited in years. That room was a storage unit. Now it's functional." "That's not the point," Colin snapped. "It is exactly the point," I replied. "You made a unilateral decision. I adapted." Tracy looked between us, something dawning on her face. "Marissa," she said carefully, "don't you think you're being a little spiteful?" I shrugged. I'm being comfortable. Colin slammed his hand down on the armrest. You're embarrassing me. I met his eyes. You embarrassed yourself when you turned jealousy into a punishment. That was when he played what he thought was his winning card. Fine, he said. I'm claiming the master bathroom. It's mine. You can use the hall one. Tracy gasped softly, like this was dramatic and unfair. I nodded once. Okay. Colin blinked. Tracy blinked harder. That's it? Colin asked. Yeah, I said. That's it. He stared at me like he was waiting for anger, or tears, or negotiation. But I was already planning. The hall bathroom was closer to my room anyway. Within 2 days, it stopped being the hall bathroom. It became a spa. Rainfall showerhead, $60. High-tech bidet seat, $200. Plush towels, plants, a humidifier, soft lighting. It smelled like eucalyptus and calm. Meanwhile, the master bathroom, accessible only through the bedroom Colin had claimed, became his responsibility, cleaning included. I heard him complain about it on the phone with his sister Paige one night. She doesn't even use it anymore, he said. She made the hall one fancy. Paige laughed. You kind of did this to yourself. He hung up on her. 3 days later, the real problem arrived. Colin's job went hybrid. 3 days in office, 2 days remote. He needed a home office. Guess which room he wanted? He knocked on my door at 7 a.m. I didn't open it. I spoke through it. What? We need to talk about the spare room, he said. My room? I asked. It needs to be an office. Congratulations, I said. Set up a desk in the bedroom. There's no space. Rearrange. Silence. Then, or you could stop being petty and give me the room. I laughed. A real laugh this time. The room I furnished? I asked. The one I live in because you kicked me out? I'll let you back into the bedroom, he offered quickly, if you give me the room. And apologize? I asked. Obviously. No, I said. He slammed his fist against the door and walked away. 20 minutes later, I heard drilling. He'd set up a desk in the corner of the living room, our shared space. I bought noise-canceling headphones that night. $300. Worth every cent. Then he crossed a line. I came home one evening and noticed scratch marks around my keypad lock. Small, deliberate. My stomach dropped. I confronted him in the kitchen. Did you try to break into my room? I asked. It's not your room, he snapped. I needed to check for damage. By forcing the lock? It's my house too. And that's why tampering with my property is a problem, I said calmly. That's attempted property damage. He laughed. You wouldn't do anything. I didn't raise my voice. That night, I installed a hallway camera facing my door. Common area, legal. Colin noticed the red light immediately. Every time he passed it, his jaw tightened. Good. When Jenna came over to watch football with me one Sunday, Colin lost it. You can't have people in there, he shouted down the hall. Why? I asked. It's my room. I don't want strangers in my house. Jenna's been here dozens of times, I said. You went to her birthday last year. Not in that room. That was when he called the police. I stood in the hallway while the officer listened, arms crossed, exhaustion etched into his face. He locked himself, Colin started, then corrected, scowling. She locked herself in a room. The officer looked at me. Ma'am, do you live here? Yes. Do you pay the mortgage? Yes. Are you being threatened? No. He turned back to Colin. Is she breaking any laws? Colin opened his mouth. Closed it. The officer sighed. You two need counseling. And then he left. Afterward, Colin sent me a payment request. $1,400. Half the room upgrades. Marital property. I declined it. Then I sent one back. $1,900. Half the bedroom furnishings I'm banned from. He declined mine. Then sent another. $500. Emotional distress. I sent one back for $1. Description: box carrying incident. Silence followed. But it wasn't over, because when control stops working quietly, it gets reckless. And Colin was about to make a mistake he couldn't explain away. The silence didn't last. It never does when someone like Colin realizes intimidation has failed. He went for infrastructure next. The Wi-Fi password changed while I was at work. No warning, no message, just a sudden dead screen in my room when I tried to log on that night. I stared at the incorrect password alert for a few seconds, then laughed, low and incredulous. Of course. Control always moves to the essentials eventually. Sleep, food, access, connection. I didn't knock on the bedroom door. I didn't text him. I opened my phone and ordered my own internet line. $90 a month. The technician came 2 days later, glanced at the layout, raised an eyebrow. Home office? He asked. Something like that, I said. When the green light blinked on and my laptop connected instantly, I felt a quiet satisfaction settle into my chest. Colin noticed that night. You got separate internet? He asked, incredulous. Yes. You're being dramatic. I smiled faintly. I'm being uninterrupted. That's when the noise campaign started. Wine nights, craft nights, book club, loud laughter, clinking glasses, chairs scraping, always right outside my door. Always during my work calls. Always late. I upgraded my sound bar, hung thicker blackout curtains, played white noise like a shield. Colin escalated again. He didn't understand that every move he made only trained me to document harder, plan cleaner, react colder. And then, finally, he went too far. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays are boring, predictable, safe. I came home and immediately knew something was wrong. My door was open. Wide open. My heart slammed so hard it made me dizzy. I rushed forward and froze in the doorway. The keypad lock was gone. Gone. The metal scratched, screws missing, wood around the frame splintered. Inside, my room was wrong. Not destroyed, violated. The bed stripped. Sheets piled on the floor like discarded skin. The mini fridge unplugged, a sour smell creeping out. Food spoiled. Containers open, the console unplugged. My things rearranged with the careless authority of someone who wanted to remind me this wasn't really mine. On the desk sat a piece of paper. Printed. Maintenance inspection required. No logo, no signature, just arrogance. My hands were shaking when I called him. What the hell did you do? I asked. I needed to inspect the room for damage, Colin said smoothly. Too smoothly. You broke into my room, I said. You destroyed my lock. It's not breaking in if I own the house. You tampered with my property. Prove it. And that was the moment something in me clicked into place. I stopped arguing. I said one word. Okay. That scared him more than yelling ever could have. That night I didn't sleep much. Not because I was afraid, but because I was done pretending this was just a fight. I laid everything out on my desk. Screenshots of texts where he admitted kicking me out. Photos of the lock damage, the police incident number, video clips from the hallway camera, receipts, dates, times. By morning, it wasn't a marriage conflict. It was a record. I called a lawyer. Not to threaten divorce. Not yet. To establish boundaries. 3 days later, Colin was served papers requesting exclusive use of my room, compensation for damaged property, formal division of household spaces, documentation of harassment and interference. He read them standing in the kitchen. His hands shook. You got a lawyer? He whispered. You broke into my room, I said calmly. This is what happens next. He dropped the papers on the counter like they burned. You're ruining our marriage. No, I said. I'm documenting its collapse. That's when he changed tactics. He started being nice. Too nice. Lavish dinners cooked and plated beautifully, eaten slowly in front of me. My favorite pastries placed just close enough to smell. Outfits he knew I liked. A voice softened with regret that never quite crossed into apology. I kept living my life. Meal prepping. Gaming with Jenna online. Starting an evening coding class. Then he went nuclear. I came home to voices in the dining room. Laughter. A woman's laugh. I stopped short. Sophie. And her boyfriend Matt. Seated at my table. Colin stood at the head, pouring wine like a host in a commercial. Marissa, he said brightly, join us. Getting to know our neighbors. Sophie looked mortified the second she saw me. Matt looked confused. I felt nothing. No thanks, I said, grabbing a protein shake from my fridge. I've got plans. Don't be rude, Colin said, syrupy. We're having dinner. I'm good. Sophie stood abruptly. We should go. Early morning tomorrow. But you just got here, Colin protested. Food smells great, she said quickly. Thanks. They left within 2 minutes. The door barely closed before Colin exploded. You embarrassed me. You invited the woman you accused me of flirting with, I said, to prove a point. That's on you. I was being nice. You were being manipulative. This is me saving our marriage. No, I said quietly. This is you refusing to admit you were wrong. He stared at me like I'd struck him. Then there's nothing to save, I said. That night he packed a bag. Left for his sister Paige's. Not forever, just long enough to post cryptic quotes online about self-respect and toxic partners. The irony didn't even slow him down. I sat alone in my room that night. The house too quiet. My space finally resecured with a new lock. My lawyer texted, "You're protected." He made several critical mistakes. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. I didn't feel victorious. I felt resolved, because I knew what was coming next. People like Colin don't leave quietly. They leave with witnesses. And trucks. Colin came back 2 weeks later. Not alone. I heard the diesel engine before I saw it. The low, heavy rumble of something final. When I looked out the window and saw the moving truck parked crooked in the driveway, my chest tightened in a way that felt familiar now. Prepared. Colin walked in first, jaw set, shoulders squared like he was entering a negotiation instead of the home we'd built for nearly 10 years. Behind him was his brother, Ethan, already irritated, already convinced I was the villain of the story he'd been told. No warning, no text, no courtesy. Just invasion. "I'm taking my things," Colin announced, like he was reading from a script. "And the bedroom furniture, it's half mine." "Cool," I said. That wasn't the reaction he wanted. He blinked. "You're just okay with that?" "Yes," I said. "Make a list. I'll grab receipts." Ethan scoffed. "You really screwed this up, you know that?" I met his eyes calmly. "How so?" "You humiliated my brother, made him feel unwanted in his own house." "He kicked me out of the bedroom for helping someone carry a box," I said, then broke into my room. "That's not what he said." "I'm sure it isn't." Colin jumped in. "I want the living room TV, too. Bought it before we married." "Receipt says otherwise," I said, pulling up the order on my phone. His face flushed. "Fine," he snapped. "The kitchen appliances, then. We bought those together." "Take half," I said. "How do I take half a blender, Marissa?" I tilted my head. "That's your puzzle, like the couch was mine." Ethan reached for the coffee maker. "That one's from my room," I said, stepping between him and the counter. "Bought 6 weeks ago." "Prove it." I did. They spent 3 hours arguing over lamps, chairs, utensils, every object suddenly loaded with meaning because neither of them wanted to admit what this was really about. Control. Colin tried to take my gaming chair. "This was in the spare room originally," he said. "And you kicked me into the spare room," I replied. "It's mine now." "A judge won't see it that way." "Then let a judge decide." He backed off. The real explosion came from the attic. Colin stormed down the stairs, face red, eyes wild. "You locked the attic storage?" "No," I said evenly. "I padlocked my half. Yours is open." "How did you divide it?" "Measured. Taped down the middle." He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "This is pathetic," he said. "We're adults." "Adults don't get kicked out of bedrooms for imagined crimes," I said. But here we are. Ethan muttered something under his breath. "Careful," I said quietly. "You're in my house." "It's Colin's, too." For now, Colin froze. "What does that mean?" I didn't raise my voice. "We're divorcing." The word landed hard. He sank onto the bottom step like the air had been knocked out of him. "This isn't how it was supposed to go," he whispered. I looked at him, really looked. "How was it supposed to go?" He swallowed. "You were supposed to apologize, sleep on the couch a few nights, feel guilty, come back and value me more." "And I was supposed to value you for falsely accusing me?" I asked. "That's not fighting for a marriage. That's manipulation." Ethan helped him stand. "Let's go," he said. "I'm not leaving," Colin insisted weakly. "This is my house." "You already left," I said. "You're at Paige's." He tried one last time, his voice breaking into something almost sincere. "If you loved me, you'd apologize and end this." "If you loved me," I said softly, "you wouldn't need me to lie to make you feel secure." They left with the truck half full. Colin crying, Ethan muttering about lawyers. The divorce papers were filed 2 weeks later. He fought it at first, pushed for counseling, mediation. The court-appointed mediator listened to our story and said flatly, "This is over." His lawyer advised him to take my buyout offer. I kept the house. I paid him his half of the equity. Worth every cent. The master bedroom felt like a ghost town when I moved back in. Too quiet, too big. So I didn't rush it. I kept my setup in my room. The master became a place just for sleep. Best of both worlds. Colin texts sometimes. "This really ended over a box." I answered once. "It was never the box. It was respect, trust, partnership. You chose control." No reply after that. I started therapy. Should have done it years ago. I started dating lightly. Coffee dates, honesty, upfront. People are stunned when they hear the story. One woman laughed and said, "You turned a spare room into a fortress instead of apologizing. Iconic." Another called me stubborn. Both were right. Last weekend, Jenna helped me move the rest of the bedroom furniture back. We opened the windows, let the light in. The house is quiet now. Not lonely. Calm. And every time I walk past the spare room, the room that saved me, I smile. Because sometimes the smallest battle reveals the biggest truth. And I will never apologize for something I didn't do.